Good day, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Daduna Gohreidze, Chief Legal and Contracts Officer at FIDIC, and I'm delighted to welcome you all today as we present FIDIC's upcoming publication, the FIDIC Carbon Management Guide and the Carbon Emissions Management Guidances for FIDIC Contracts. This important new guide is a practical tool designed to support the infrastructure and construction sector in managing carbon across all stages of the project lifecycle. Thank you all for joining us today. We have an excellent panel of speakers. The guide will be presented by our experts who have devoted significant time and effort to developing it, and we'll also hear valuable perspectives from the contractor side and from the Asian Development Bank. Thank you all our speakers for joining today. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank all our contributors and reviewers involved in preparing this publication. In particular, the FIDIC Contracts Committee and Task Group 23, who have brought together FIDIC contract experts and leading international specialists in sustainability and decarbonization, and of course to our legal and special advisors. Throughout the development process, FIDIC actively consulted with the industry and the multilateral development banks, and we're truly grateful for all the support and valuable feedback we have received from our partners and friendly reviewers. Before we begin, I'd like to share a bit of a background on FIDIC's long-standing commitment to sustainability and how today's publication and the guide that we will be presented builds on that foundation. Sustainability has been one of FIDIC's three core founding principles for over 110 years, alongside quality and integrity. In 2021, FIDIC launched the FIDIC Climate Change Charter, a call to action encouraging all engineers to take the lead in planning, designing, and developing projects in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including carbon reduction. In September 2025, FIDIC introduced the Carbon Management Framework, the CMF, a practical guide as well to help project teams to manage whole life carbon emissions in infrastructure projects. The CMF provides simple step-by-step actions that work for projects of any size and stage, making carbon reduction an integral part of everyday decision-making. Many of you will be aware that FIDIC has been producing standard form contracts since 1957. FIDIC contracts are now most widely used international standard forms for construction and engineering projects applied in around 170 countries. FIDIC contracts are available in 32 languages, are endorsed by multilateral development banks, and represent global best practice for the industry. Given that the infrastructure and construction sectors are responsible for a significant share of global emissions, FIDIC believes that contract users and stakeholders have a powerful role to play in driving the decarbonization of the construction industry worldwide. It was in line with this belief and alongside other key initiatives that I have mentioned that FIDIC established the Task Group 23 in March 2023 under the direction of its contract committee, and the significant progress has been made so far. The task group's mission was to create carbon management tools for users of FIDIC contracts, ensuring practical and globally applicable guidance is produced. After multiple reviews, and you will hear from Adriana and from task group members, the FIDIC Carbon Management Guide is planned to be officially launched during the International Contract Users Conference in London in December later this year. So this is an exclusive opportunity, a preview to our publication that today we will share the FIDIC's new guide to you, which is the objective of today's webinar. And it is now my pleasure to hand over to Adriana Spasova, a member of the FIDIC Contracts Committee and the liaison of the Contracts Committee to the task group, who will guide us through the presentation and the new publication. Adriana has been instrumental and the driving force for this development. And Adriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daduna. We are really happy that we have reached this point where we can present documents which are ready in the pipeline for publication. As you said, this group started exactly 2.5 years ago, and it is fantastic what has been done. And I want to mention here that everything started on a webinar like this. It was in 2022, where we had 200 enthusiasts, and we saw that this has to be done. And our difference from other organizations was the holistic approach, because it is not enough to focus on the provisions of the contracts, but it is even more important to start from the procurement and project preparation, because a consultant makes a big difference proposing instead of demolition, renovation of an asset, and all the process going through all the phases of the project are in our focus now. Starting from net zero, we move to carbon management, recognizing that different countries have different targets, and wanting to prepare something which is very flexible and may be used by all participants in all projects all over the world. And I'm really glad to present you now the authors of this amazing carbon management guide, starting with the chair, Hugo Fonseca, who made like 36 meetings in the first 2 months for brainstorming, and this was a huge effort. And you have to know that all task group members and contract committee members are volunteers. So everyone had to balance with family and business schedule. But all of us are very enthusiastic about this to happen. And we believe that we shall make a change. So Hugo, I shall give you the floor, and then I shall give the floor to the other authors of this guide. And of course, we are very glad to have a representative of the international contractors, Andrea Constanzi, and to have Jesper Pedersen, who is actually presenting the multilateral development banks. And his role is very important because he is procurement director, and the Asian Development Bank, I think, is the leading one at the moment to implement these new trends for carbon management. But besides our excellent chair, we have a great group, 5 people who have different profiles. And we have Jeremy, a brilliant lawyer who had already experienced in similar provisions. We have Edith. She was proposed to become member of the group by the European International Contractors, and she was our knowledge manager. We learned so much from Edith because she's head of sustainability in Siona. We have Bipin, who is a part of Rambo, which is a leading consultant in this area. And he's based in India, and he represents the consultant designers. And we have Rami, who is based in Saudi Arabia, who has a very good perspective of this part of the world, and not only because he's working on other FIDIC initiatives. And we have another technical expert, Idris Kasrada, who is based in France, and he also has shown us that it is not so easy to calculate the emissions, but it can be done. And I'm really glad that now we can start with our short presentation, and hope to see many of you in London to have the books in your hands. So Hugo, I start with you. And thank you very much for your efforts day and night to create this, to lead the group, to help everyone, and to draft. And it is really an amazing effort, and you are really brilliant. And I'm glad that you could do this, and we'll continue, of course, to do this for some revisions, additions later on. So my question for you is just briefly to present the principles which are in the center of our carbon management guide. This is very important that we have extracted these principles. So Hugo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll jump into the principles, thanking again to you and to FIDIC for organizing, and to the team. And because we have a team of 6 plus one Adriana, and it's one Adriana because it's a superwoman that is chasing us and making sure that the work is as per the standard that we need. We have 6 team members, and so we have 6 principles. And basically, we looking at the life cycle version of the project after a lot of brainstorming and after many iterations, came up with a number of principles as they are presented there, and I'll go into each one, where we basically felt these are aspects that need to be part of the life cycle of the project, need to be looked at throughout the entire project. And so we turned it into the carbon management principles that are part of the CM guide. So going into principle number 1, if I may, well, the first aspect that we have in the guide, not the first, but the first principle, is to have a carbon emissions budget as an evaluation criteria. So our view is that the only way for transformation of the industry is if we get contractors, and even this can also be applied to services and to other types of contracts, but in this case the main impact is from works and then management of the assets, is for the carbon emissions budget to be competitive. And so in the same way that tenderers compete in price, and they have to put forward also technical ability, they should compete in terms of carbon emissions to try and keep the emissions of a certain contract, the emissions produced to execute a certain contract, as low as possible. And so competition usually drives innovation, and we saw this as a basis for every project to take this into consideration. The carbon emissions budget is also key to the provisions that Jeremy will introduce in a bit. Without the carbon emissions budget, there will be no possibility for the provisions to work in the contract. And finally, unlike what is happening in contracts, and we got this feedback from our technical experts in the team, what's happening in several contracts, which is the employers are forcing or are establishing a budget, let's say, or a percentage of savings or so on. We here see that the version for this, it's the opposite. It's for the contractors to actually calculate what they can do, as they do for price, and I'll keep going to this comparison, and to put forward their best offer in terms of carbon emissions together with everything else, and therefore being an evaluation criteria in tenders. On principle number 2, if we can go there, and I'm trying to save time for the rest, all stakeholders must collaborate to improve the carbon balance sheet. So this is no longer at the contract level, but at the project level. And so we might have a works contract or any contract that is part of a project, but the project will have many contracts in order for it to be produced from start to finish. And so the view here is that all stakeholders must collaborate to improve what we refer as carbon balance sheet, that you'll see as a defined term in the CM guide, which is basically an accounting document, as it sounds, which is a balance sheet of emissions and removal measures that will, let's say, be accounted throughout the project. So here is a driver of the full life cycle, is that for people not to look at the project as something stopped in time, there was something that decided in the beginning and then we just have to live with it. No, it's let's say a principle that we try to convey, that everyone involved at the project at any given time should do their best to improve the balance sheet, to improve what are to reduce emissions to the minimum possible and to improve and exploit the carbon removal measures that are there. So on number 3, we have the importance of promoting measures that reduce emissions rather than relying on removals and offsets. The view is basically that once we emit any GHGs into the atmosphere, well, the harm is done, and then we are working against it in order to find a way to save and to offset also those emissions. So the best solution is actually not to emit anything, and therefore any measure that actually reduces the emissions before they are emitted, it's better than any other measure to remove or to offset later on. Or to offset later on. So this is basically the principle, and therefore this should be a guiding principle. It's also, let's say, the one of the main aspects of what Aduna referred of the carbon management framework. It's this sort of aspect that it's to work towards low carbon solutions, work towards not emitting, and so on. So this is the same sort of principle that everyone is covering, and we are doing it in our way in terms of the promoting it into contract measures and ways for it to be beneficial for both parties. So the principle number 4, if we may. So this is about the calculation methodology. One of the main issues and discussions that we had for months is about, and Adrian already referred to it, it's about calculating the carbon emissions. And therefore there are several methods, there are several ways, there are many standards and growing every day. And of course, this will become an integral part of the contract clauses and the SAM provisions, and therefore a clear and unambiguous carbon emissions calculation methodology is key. Without it, we'll just have, for sure, disputes and other issues that are not relevant or that are not important to be a driver of change. On the other hand, what we want is to measure the main aspects. So the calculation methodology will be used from, if we want, start to finish of the project. It is the way that emissions will be calculated and introduced into the balance sheet. It's the way that the carbon emissions budget for tenders will be calculated, and then the actual carbon emissions will also be calculated in order to be compared throughout the project, throughout the contract. And therefore, it's key that it is clear and ambiguous, and that it allows for everyone to understand how they are measuring and what they're measuring. Carbon Management Principle 5 is about the removal of the emissions. Okay. This is something which is probably different from what's happening in various contracts where carbon emissions are trying to be managed, where sometimes the responsibility is being transferred to contractors or to whomever is the second party. What we see is that the employer is the one that is driving the project. He's the one that defined the need from the start, and that will drive the project until its end. And therefore, they are the ones in the best position to manage the emissions of the project in terms of how do I compensate for these emissions that are needed for me to deliver this project. And therefore, the position of the CM guide is that employers need to be the ones driving the effort of removals, of offsets if need be, and are the ones most interested in reducing emissions to the minimum, so that they have to remove as least as possible. So they are, let's say, in our view and of the CM guide, they are the champions of reducing emissions to the minimum. On the principle 6, it's about the continuous transformation of the industry. So what you saw so far is if we have employers responsible for removing, then it means that employers will also be driving and trying to drive innovation on the supply chain of removal measures, and therefore they will become the ones acquiring those measures, and they will want to promote that. Contractors, if they're competing on or service providers of certain services that also emit substantially will want to drive their supply chain in order to provide them with better solutions so that they can compete and tender with a lower carbon emissions budget. And so here and funders, financial institutions, of course, they have, let's say, the power to instill this transformation also in every player that is involved in projects that involve construction. And therefore, the final principle is basically bringing everything together and forcing that a project is a way to transform the industry, and this should be something promoted by everyone. And with this, I'll pass the ball back to Adriana so that you can introduce the next speaker. I hope I stayed within my time.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. And there's already one question for you related to the distribution of the criteria for selection of contractors. You can answer in the chat or later on explain when we enter the slides. And I would ask one person who has concerns about the clients not forging sustainable solutions to write more to explain this point of view so that we can address it. And now I'm glad to give the floor to Jeremy. Jeremy, please present the mechanism of the carbon emissions management clause, which is something new, which is introduced with the other instruments, and how it works.
That's great. Thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Adriana. I think just important to remember that, as Daduna said, this guidance is a practical tool for managing carbon on a project. So it's not all about the law. It's not all about the specifics of the contract. There's a lot more guidance packed into the document, but obviously I'm a lawyer, so I will talk about the clause that we're introducing. I think a word about our overall approach is to adopt a light touch, no change for the sake of it. And so the clause comes in 7 parts. The first is definitions. It's always important when talking about new things that everyone is using the same definition to refer to matters. We're all talking about the same things together. So definitions particularly crucial when we're talking about something new. The second clause is about objectives. The idea is that parties collaborate to achieve the objectives they choose for the project. The third clause is about obligations. It is a contract after all. The idea is that the contractor completes the works so that the actual emissions do not exceed the carbon emissions budget, which Hugo was talking about. Clauses 4 and 5 deal with reporting and meetings, and this is where the need for the clear, unambiguous calculation methodology that Hugo was talking about is so important. A contractor will do the reporting, the employer will assess the contractor's reports, and the idea is that they're reporting against the budget. Is the contractor over the budget or under the budget? And this is where clauses 6 and 7, which are the key clauses of the contract, come in. You've got a graphical representation of clause 6 on the screen, and this is about changes to the budget. And now there are lots of reasons why the budget might change. For example, there might be delays on the project, and it'll be up to the engineer to make a determination as to the reasons for the delay and the effect or consequences of that delay on the budget itself. And the way the engineer does that is to adopt the typical FIDIC approach that we are all familiar with, and that involves notices, it involves making a determination. And the important thing from a contractor's point of view to be aware of, the issue is whether or not an experienced contractor was responsible for the delaying event. Simply because there has been a delay to a project or because the budget has gone up, it isn't automatically lumped upon the contractor. An assessment has to be made in relation to the causes of the increase or decrease to the budget, and the contractor isn't going to be automatically penalised. So it's important that the engineer is on point and understands the process. Equally, it's important for a contractor to give a notice in a timely notice, because as with all things, the earlier a notice of a potential issue is given, the easier it is to deal with that issue. And it might mean there's no need to ultimately adjust the budget. But the basic idea is that the means to adjust the budget follows the ordinary, well-known FIDIC principles. And then we have clause 7, which deals with incentives and damages. Now, the key idea behind the clause is to incentivize the contractor to come in under the carbon budget. So that the contractor will produce carbon emission reports on a milestone basis, and these milestones are based on work events. They're not based on time. And then the engineer will review these reports, and they will see the extent to which the contractor has come in over or under the budget. And if there's a difference between the actual budget and the figure of actual carbon emissions that's been achieved or not by the contractor, then the engineer will make a determination. If the difference is a small one, and it's one that's within a threshold, it's we set in the contract, we recommend 2%, then no action is taken. We appreciate that it's not always as easy as you might think to measure the carbon emissions. But if the budget is over and it's more than the threshold, there's the potential for the employer to levy damages, and the amount of those damages will be set out in the contract. They will be capped, and any carbon emissions damages will fall within the overall liability cap of the contract. They won't extend the cap in any way. And if the contractor succeeded in coming under the budget and the reduction is less than the threshold, then the contractor is entitled to the payment of incentives. And again, those incentives will be pre-agreed. And I appreciate that's a very, very quick whistle-top tour of what the contract does, but hopefully it's enough to give you a brief understanding of what we're looking to achieve.
Thank you, Jeremy. Now I shall go to Rami, because you have heard from me how important is the holistic approach, how important are the services of the consultant for carbon reduction. Then you heard from Hugo, who explained to you the main principles which are embedded in the carbon management guide. And then you heard from Jeremy, who explained you the mechanism which is integrated in the carbon emission management guidance for the books. So there will be guidance for the red book, for the yellow book, for the silver book, and so on. And Rami, tell us, how can we navigate between so many documents? Rami, the floor is yours. Rami?
Yes. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Jeremy and Hugo, for the presentation. For the FIDIC Carbon Management System is built on 2 interconnected pillars. Pillar number 1 is the FIDIC CM guidance. This is strategic foundation, setting the overarching principles and the full life cycle approach. We have pillar number 2 is the FIDIC CEM guidance suite. The FIDIC CEM is like operational toolkits with guides for each types of contract. However, there is a crucial distinction exists within this guidance, where we have 2 families. Family number 1 is the FIDIC CEM guidance for service agreement. This plays, let's say, exceptional, comprehensive, and strategic role. This is the only guide that covers the whole life cycle, starting from project inceptions through the design, procurement, construction, and all the way to the end of operation and decommissioning of a constructed asset We have family number 2 is the CEM guidance for works contract like red, yellow, and silver. This is phase specific, focusing on carbon management during the execution phase. Let's simplify it. Imagine that the CM guidance determine the project carbon destination. The CEM guidance for the service agreement is like the project chief navigator charting the project from start to finish, and the CEM guidance for works contracts is specialist driver for specific part of the project. Next slide, please. The guides are backed with technical and practical support. You will find the example like the carbon balance sheets, and you will find also QA sections for practical implementation guidance and clarification for main concerns. Next slide. Now, how to navigate this guidance? To implement this guidance, you need to follow clear and three-phase navigation map. Phase number 1, start with strategy. Use the CM guidance and the CEM guidance for service agreement. At the very beginning, the client shall use the CM guidance to set the vision. Then, the client shall engage the consultant using the CEM guidance for service agreement. The consultant will support the client, embed the carbon thinking on, let's say, the decarbonization principles from day one by establishing carbon target, by determining the calculation methodologies and other strategies that will, let's say, guide the subsequent works construct. Then we will move to stage number 2. The stage number 2, preparations of tender documents and precise work contracts. To create effective tender documents, the CM guides sets the parameter for strategic framework through the CM principles explained by my colleague Hugo, and evaluation criteria for tenderers and tenders. Giving, for example, the guide give example of how the employer may use the rated criteria to evaluate tenders using price, technical and engineering capabilities and carbon emissions factor. Then the relevant CEM guidance for that works contract, either red, yellow, and silver, let's say, give the operational mechanism by, for example, through the CEM particular conditions, schedule of carbon emissions, and other contract-specific provisions. The consultant now employed under the CEM guidance for service agreement, make sure that the decarbonization requirements established under phase 1 have been translated correctly into the tender documents and work contracts. Now we move to phase number 3, align and manage. It's like a process monitor and control in project management. Here, the consultant ensure the strategic continuity using tools like the carbon balance sheet, to monitor the progress across all works contract and ensure that the project is on track from day one until the operation and decommissioning. The employer retain the ultimate responsibility guided by the consultant expertise. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rami. Now, before I go to Edith, here's the time to answer to the question which is in the chat by Ravindra. She's asking, I don't know whether it is he or she, sorry, which stage is most important to control carbon emissions? Is it the green designing and project site, or both equally important? Imagine that you can change a lot during the project preparation. You make the huge difference whether you demolish or you renovate, whether you do the green design. You cannot make such changes during construction. You can change 20% at most of the expected carbon emissions. So the big change is in the project preparation. That's why I'm really proud that you shall see our carbon emissions management guidance for the white book, and you can use it for the other contracts for services in the FIDIC suite. Because always from my experience of 38 years, I have seen disasters come from poor project preparation. For me, everyone should concentrate in better project preparation and from the beginning to start to think about carbon emissions. And this is the key to make it better. But now I give the floor to Edith, who is in the center of projects where her company, Acciona, is making all these efforts to be a pilot contractor with net zero emissions. So Edith, my question for you is, because your company has pledged to be net zero, what should be the main drivers to incentivize the other contractors to follow your example, and what are the obstacles?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Adriana, for the question, and thank you very much to all for being here today. For me, it's a pleasure to being part of this great group. I have learned so much from all of you, and I thank you for that. Regarding your questions, our net zero pledge is a strategic transformation that we embed all operations that we have as a company. So what we've learned, and we know that in the construction business is really difficult because we are still having a lot of challenges, but we'll learn that this needs a systemic change and not isolated efforts, and this is where this kind of works like the 1% in this guideline has a huge importance. What we see in pledging this net zero is that we can incentivize for leadership from clients and financiers, because when carbon targets are embedded in procurement and contracts, they become non-negotiable. So the clients that demand this measured carbon performance can make that the whole supply chain response. So this helps to achieve a global and a real net zero. And what do we need also to incentivize this? And we need the work that has been done here in this guideline, and we need practical tools. We need this to be real, to be effective, to be embedded in the day-to-day work that we developed. And these can integrate the sustainability mechanisms and sustainability measures to be part of the work that we perform. And also this helps in peer benchmarking and in transparency. This can help to show how we are performing things, how we are doing things, and how can we learn from each other in different projects, and to demonstrate that these kind of actions establishing since the early stages of the project, as one of the principles of the guideline is saying, can help in achieving this objective. And for sure that we have obstacles, and it's still a challenge, but this is one of the main obstacles would be this fragmented data methodology. So this is why we have tried in this guideline to put a framework to be used that could help in defining this. And also one of the main obstacles will be the later stage sustainability integration. So if we start in the early stages, in the early beginning, this is where all these measures can be taken into account, and well, all the objectives can be aligned. There are also some regulatory uncertainty that in some markets with this lack of carbon legislation that make it harder to justify. But moving towards a common objective, and having tools like the 1% in this guideline could help us in going beyond compliance, and also in activating financing infrastructure, going beyond this compliance. And we have to think that we have also projects that are guiding through the decarbonized economy, and in that projects is really it's important to take into consideration the carbon when building that, because this project will serve as a decarbonization of the economy. So we have to take into consideration also measures that could help on that. So our experience shows that in that Acciona's project, this net zero, this can be achievable, but it also requires internal conviction and external alignment, and that's why for me participating in this guideline, it's been a way of demonstrating how we can collaborate to create these norms that could help in finally making this net zero real.
Thank you so much, Edith, and really your leading example is very much appreciated, and I can see some practical questions. If you or Hugo or Idris want to answer, you can do this, or write to me that you want to talk about it later on when we have the last minutes for Q&A. I can see in the chat there are a lot of fans of Rami, and someone who asked the emails to be given, if possible, by the authors. I shall write my email, and if you wish your email, you can also write to everyone. And now we continue with our technical consultant, Idris. And my question to Idris is, in your view, Idris, what are the main difficulties for the construction industry to achieve net zero?
Yes, thank you, Adriana, and good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just to say thank you also to the other explanations from the different speakers and the example provided by Edith. To explain from where I speak, I'm an environmental and energy consultant, and operating in France, sometimes in other countries. And I'm also involved in the FIDIC Sustainable Development Committee, where we have some, I would say, works on biodiversity and other environmental criteria, which are also important to be taken into consideration during the projects. And I'm also a member of the FIDIC French Member Association, which name is CINOV. And well, having said that, as you know, decarbonization, it's a journey, and I will try to answer as I'm going to bring a short perspective on the dynamic. And to begin, I would say that for one asset, one project, to summarize what has been said, is that the main steps are to set up a target and adjust a carbon budget with the FIDIC contractual instruments, which allow to define what will be the reference for the incentive and also the damages. And then when the project is going on, the challenge will be to manage the GHG along the project with consistent practices. And I have seen some questions in the chat, and of course, this consistency is a sensitive topic. And then based on the assessment, there are decisions to take, and they will base on the GHG performance information. And for this, some enablers are really crucial. First, the leadership with the key project team support, not only, I would say, at the strategic level, but also on the ground during the project. And with means of implementation, because it's a skill and it takes also it's a work to deal with this matter. It needs some I would say knowledge and also means to take for example to collect the data to make the assessment with a methodology as this is one of the questions. So the more suitable methodology, and with that, of course, the IT tools have to be suitable. And the third, I would say, main enablers would be the evidence-based activity data, because data coming from a project can be taken into account by different means. It can be in the invoices, but it can be also with some direct measure on what the quantities of materials, for example, are delivered on a project. So evidence-based data activity are really important, and also the unoriented data, meaning that when, for example, it's one tons of steel, it would represent, for example, 2 tons or 4 tons or 8 tons of CO2, depending on the location and the provider. And these evidence-based activity data and these primary, if possible, unoriented data along the project will provide or will help to provide a consistent carbon information. So these are some enablers, main enablers for the project. And with the experience of 1, 2, 3 projects, because for many practitioners it's a new adventure. It's a new page of their work. With the experience of the performance level for different assets and projects, the GHG performance is expected to improve over time according 2030 and 2050 objectives, for example. And it should support the alignment of the infrastructure sector with this decarbonization pathway, and also taking into account the different sustainability goals. And in this regard, the FIDIC Carbon Management Clause, as it has been presented by Hugo and also Jeremy, this Carbon Management Clause will support this learning curve, because for sure it's not a common practice on the ground. So one of the challenge is to develop the capabilities along this journey. And just to finish very shortly, I would say that there is also another initiative which has been developed by another team at FIDIC, and they release the FIDIC Carbon Management Framework, and it can be also a useful resource for the different stakeholders, and mostly for the engineering companies. Thank you, and of course, if there is any question or remark, they're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you wish, you can write your email in the chat, because people ask a lot of questions and help us in the end to answer some of them. And now I go to Bipin. Bipin, your input for the consultants' activities was precious. And now I would like to ask you Are the consultants ready to lead in this process of carbon management? What do you think? Not only in your company, which is leading one, but what do you think about the market?
I think, Adriana, the consultants are very, very excited. I speak from the perspective of Rambol. The process of sustainability and for reduction of carbon has started a few years ago, but this is the time when the consultants are very, very excited, and we are just trying to get to systems and processes to optimize the carbon reduction. So we are excited, and we are also getting a lot of positive response from the employers, particularly the government entities who are very much interested in reducing the carbon on the infrastructure projects, particularly. So we are looking at it extremely positively.
Okay, so I
Thank
hope you will be helping FIDIC to develop the materials for the specialized training, and there will be certification which will be
Yes.
prepared next year, and this will be also a big effort, and your input is precious. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to Andrea. Andrea, we are really glad that you are with us to present not only the point of view of the international contractors, but also you have been involved as a friendly reviewer to preview these documents, and we want to hear from you. What is your impression of the Carbon Management Guide? What do you think about it?
Yes, thank you, Adriana. And first of all, thank you everyone for this invitation to FIDIC. And congratulations, first of all, for this amazing effort represented by this guide. Yes, from a contractor perspective, but also legal contractual perspective, that's my area. I would like to comment on what this introduction represents for the industry. I think that the guidance will reshape our approach of contractor on procurement and contract management level in the context, of course, in the growing demand for sustainable infrastructure. Before entering into such detail, yes, I would like to spend a few words on the role of contractor in sustainable infrastructure, to see also how this, let's say, new role, or let's say transformation of the role of contractor is reflected into the carbon management principle, the principle which Hugo was perfectly describing earlier. So as contractor, our role, we are aware that we play a fundamental role in delivering sustainable infrastructure. Our decision method have a significant impact on the environment. We are also aware that as the demand for greener construction grows, we should adapt to integrate sustainability into our project. And this needs is perfectly in line with the principle number 6. It is said that all stakeholders should promote the continuous transformation of the industry supply chain. Another important aspect is that sustainable infrastructure is not only about meeting the current need, but we need to ensure also longevity, resiliencies, and of course a minimal environmental footprint for future generations. This is one of the role of contractor, and this is reflected also in carbon management principle number 3, where it is said that it is crucial to promote measures that lead to fewer emissions rather than relying on removal or offset. So I would say that we are aligned. Last but not the least, let's say concept I would like to stress is collaboration among the parties. As I said, we are aware as contractors that we play a fundamental role, but we will not be able to reach any, let's say, green target or to properly implement this guide without a strong collaboration among all the stakeholder, employer, contractor, engineer, but all the stakeholder involved in this transformation. And this is exactly the same message, the same principle stated in principle number 2, all stakeholders must collaborate. Next slide, thanks. As I was anticipating, going too much detail from contractor perspective, I see, as contractor, we see two major shifts. The first is at tender phase, is a new procurement rules, or better, the procurement rules are now integrated thanks to this guide, thanks to the introduction of the carbon emission budget, to a new rules or new form of evaluation for contractor. As all you know, traditionally on procurement level, the decision about awarding of a project is based on cost, time, and quality. Now, with this introduction, with this guide, in general, the carbon performance is one of the key considerations. So the environmental performance and criteria are included directly into the procurement process. This is a fundamental shift. And this is also reported on the principle number 1. The evaluation rating criteria must include the carbon emission budget proposed by tender. So this is really a major shift. Next slide to see the other important transformation, the other important change is on contract management level. Once you are possibly awarded of a contract, the carbon emission budget proposed at tender become a formal contract obligation. This is in the context of the introduction of the carbon emission management clause, which from contractor perspective, I think has three important aspects to be underlined in this webinar. The first I've already mentioned, so there is an additional obligation for contractor in terms of carbon emission budget. Another new obligation is represented by the carbon measurement and reporting. We must prepare, maintain, and submit regular emission report following the agreed methodology and time frame. So additional obligation for contractor. Last and possibly the most challenging for, of course, from contractor perspective, is the introduction of a specific and possible application of liquidated damages related to the emission. It is fair to say that with the introduction of damages, there is also introduction of an incentive for contractors. So the most important comment I would like to share in this context is this one. As contractor, we should pay a great attention on the cash flow issues. So if there are damages and incentive, we should pay attention on the fact that they are aligned, meaning related to the same event, not causing, for example, a cash flow stress, for example, for an application of liquid damages to a certain moment of the project, when, for example, an incentive could be just at the end. So this is the most important advice at this level. Next slide, thanks. Once we have I have described, let's say, this new environmental where contractor is going to perform, I think it could be beneficial to discuss briefly, to list which could be the challenges, but also the benefit represented by the introduction of this guide. I will not go through all these challenges and benefits, but I would like to focus on two challenges. The first is represented by skill gap, lack of technical knowledge or skilled workforce in sustainability practice. As also Idris was mentioning, there is a learning curve. Of course, at the beginning it will be challenging for all the resources involved in a project to deal with new mechanism, but also the challenge is represented by the emission reporting obligation. So from contractor perspective, for sure, we need to invest and to train a new generation of contract manager, project lawyer, construction lawyer, but also a technical engineer to deal with this new mechanism. On the other hand, it is there are for sure benefit in this introduction. Also here, just to briefly touch a couple of benefits. Reputation and market leadership, of course. If we will be able to lead in sustainability, this will improve our competitiveness and will create an advantage, adding value to our bid for the future contract. Another important aspect is the future-proofing business. If we are able to adapt to this global sustainability trend, also regulation, complex regulation, for sure we will be able to safeguard our business resilience for the future. So in short, the most we are going to invest in sustainability now, the more possibility we will have to be awarded a new contract, but also to safeguard our business. Last slide. In the last slide, thanks. I would like just to summarize the conclusion and the main takeaways for this introduction of the guides. So first of all, FIDIC, this CM guide marks a significant evolution in construction contract from contractor perspective, making sustainability a contractor priority. Additional aspect for this guide is that it provides a structured framework that support for sure contractor in achieving, let's say, green target, but also align our work with the global sustainability transition. As contractor, as I said at the beginning, we are aware that we play a fundamental role, but we should be aware as, let's say, all stakeholders, that it's a collaboration matter. So when negotiating new contract in the future under the CM guide framework, it is important for all parties to ensure that there is a balanced allocation of risk associated. So achieving the green target is a set collaborative effort. We should avoid undue burden of a single party, in this case, particularly to contractor. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Andrea. This was a good presentation to go to the money, because you are saying that we need more money upfront for sustainable technologies and materials. And Josh in the chat is asking, where does the money come for the incentives? So we understand that it may be more expensive to have such carbon emission measures, but we see now what happens with the climate changes, and we all believe that this effort should be done, and we all believe that contractors will follow the pilot companies like yours, like Siona, to change their equipment and to make such investments. So I'm really glad that now we have Jasper, because it is for everyone, it is very important to hear how the banks react to this. We have seen in the last years actually a very big change starting in the last 10 years for the ESG measures, for the ESG requirements. We can see this on the construction sites. It's completely different, and these projects and contractors and consultants all now are used to it. And I believe that if the MDBs support this initiative, we shall have success. So let's hear from Jasper. We believe that our CM guide and CM guidance complement the efforts you make and the documents you prepare for carbon emissions reductions. And my direct question is, are you planning to integrate this in your procurement documents, in your standard procurement documents? So the floor is yours, Jasper.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me for this very interesting discussion. So in very short, as a financier of infrastructure projects across the Asia and Pacific, We face a number of challenges before we are able to embrace everything which is in this guide. So the MDBs has a working group looking at what are the best practices around the world in terms of lowering carbon emissions in construction. And so far we don't have a common position, so to speak. So I'll speak more on what ADB is doing. So first of all, in terms of our own procurement policies, we are from 1st of January introducing for all internationally tendered contracts the requirement to use merit point criteria, rated criteria. And within that, we're going to allow 25% of the points to focus on sustainable procurement measures, which could be carbon management. So we're providing the policy framework in our own procurement policies to implement this. We're also working with a number of countries to implement sustainable procurement into regulatory frameworks for procurement in our member countries. Some countries have it, some are just exploring how to do it. Every country in the world, of course, bar a few ones, have signed up to the Paris Agreement and have national determined contributions in terms of carbon emissions. And they are also looking at the construction sector as a sector that can yield results towards those goals, and are interested in implementing sustainable procurement into their procurement frameworks. More specifically, we are also working with a number of countries to do market analysis of what is actually possible, because carbon management and net zero targets, etc., is all very fine, but the markets also have to support it. So we've done market analysis of green construction products in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. And it really shows that there is still a long way to go. In some countries, particularly Thailand and Vietnam, you do have some green construction materials available. However, the methodology for reporting on the emissions of these materials are lacking. So, for example, in Europe and the US, you have an environmental product declaration that clearly states what the carbon emission is. You don't have that in most of our member countries. China and India do have EPDs in some sectors, but in general, it's lacking. And that's where it becomes really difficult in terms of making it contractual requirements. So speaking on the clauses proposed to introduce in FIDIC, so if you are 2% over or under the target, you will either get penalties or bonuses. However, the quality of the data in many markets are not there to be able to use this at a contractual level. It will be based on averages in industries, in regions or in countries. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and we are working with our member states to actually introduce these kinds of measures in some countries. That being said, we are piloting carbon management in a number of contracts. So far, we've done it in India, Armenia, Kyrgyz Republic, Fiji, and Thailand. And this is to get information on what kind of data and what is the quality of the data that we can actually get. We haven't come to a point where we will have specific targets for lowering carbon emissions, because you have to crawl before you can walk. Just getting some experience in different markets on what is available in terms of getting data, what type of carbon management approaches do the market players in our region use? Because there's also a huge difference from country to country. Are there national rules? Are there national frameworks, for example, or is it European standards, US standards, etc., Australian standards, Chinese, Indian? So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. So we're right now testing the market to see what is possible and what is available. In terms of the cost of greener materials, so we have piloted in India a couple of projects where green cement has been a requirement. So basically part of the specifications. And the cost is not higher than traditional Portland cement. So there are solutions, greener solutions out there that actually doesn't cost any more for the employer. So it's really about going back to the market analysis. What is available in different markets? How can it be implemented? Taking into consideration that, especially where we work, the role that Asian Development Bank has, our clients are not necessarily willing to pay extra for sustainable products. So it's also to find which markets can actually offer without any significant price increases. So a lot is going on. We're not quite ready to adopt this, but it's definitely something that we will share with all our clients and to see how they can use it. Let me stop here. I can see we're almost running out of time, so also some time for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. So we understand that there are obstacles, but we believe that these instruments can be used because they are very flexible, and we have a lot of additional tools that maybe Hugo will mention now, answering some of the questions. And Hugo, I shall give you the floor to start answering questions from the chat.
Thank you, Adriana. I would want to also to pass some of them to the team members, but I would start with, I saw a lot of questions about the calculation methodologies, about different aspects, and I would like also to take us back to the CM guide and to the guidances and how they were thought. One of the main concerns is that FIDIC contracts and construction contracts in general are of all different sorts and types and places and sophistication of the parties and so on. There are too many variables. There is not one, let's say, one size fits all kind of solution. That's why the clause, as Jeremy explained it, it's simple and adaptable. And the two main words that I would everyone to want to keep thinking about is adaptability and future proof. These are the two main things that we kept going towards. We need to make it adaptable. The CM guide needs to work for the $5 million project in Vietnam. It needs to work for the 1 billion project in Sweden. And it does in our view. And so that's how we saw. So you will find many examples of different things. When we come to the calculation methodology, and I see some standards being posted here, like the RIC standard. Again, the RIC standard is a very good document if you are in a very sophisticated market. If you try to implement it in others, I don't, in my opinion, it will fail because it's too detailed for unsophisticated parties, for parties that are not able, or for markets, as Jasper was referring, where there are no records of suppliers in terms of their emissions and so on. So the methodology will need to be fit for the project, fit for the contracts. And this is where we believe that that parties like the financing institutions will have a role to play, employers and ministers will have a role to play. They will have to work together in order to say, well, what makes sense for this type of project? And we see, and not that the ADB needs promoting, but we see things coming out. The guide that came out for water projects and for roads projects from the ADB are very good documents that chart a way forward on a number of things also. I would say they are complementary to the FIDIC documents, not competing against them. But this is the way forward. It's FIDIC is showing a way on how to introduce this in the whole project life cycle in FIDIC contracts, and then all the other stakeholders have to do their way. If I can go very quickly into some of the questions, and I'm sorry for taking the time all for myself, but one question that we got was, what would be a fair weighting in terms of evaluation to consider sustainability and the CE budget? Well, that would depend on the project again. All of these things need to be looked at project-based, but you will find examples, and I was going to give the floor to Rami to explain a bit, but we only have 10 minutes to go and a number of things. But you will have examples attached to the FIDIC CM guidance, SEM guidances on how to implement this sort of thing in a tender. So in terms of another question we have was about overpayment for having low carbon transformation. I'll use the example that Jasper already referred. So I think that when I started my construction career, people would talk before there was, let's say, legal enforcement in several countries of safety in the construction site costs a lot. Well, it's overpayment or how do we afford things? It depends on how society perceives things. So if society believes that, let's say, emitting without any control is not acceptable, well, then the cost is not a question of it's not such a relevant matter, I would say. It's a question of choices. And so that, of course, if you ask me personally, well, there's a choice between doing a project to give water to some people or for them not to have water if it's done in another way, well, then that might be more important than controlling those emissions specifically or doing it in such a green way that the project is not feasible anymore. But these, again, will be choices. In terms of other question, where does the money come from? Well, I'm sure that this will be something, or the calculation of damages we also got. I would, Jeremy, if you want to address this. If not, I'll just continue.
I suspect you know better than everyone. I tried to address it by way of an answer with a sort of, saying how it's all very much project specific and how it's very important that the monetary limit provides an incentive compliance, but at the same time, you've got to think about the contractor. It's got to be manageable for a contractor. It's got to be at a level to make it worthwhile for the contractor to actually target coming in below the budget, because that's what, ideally we would want to do. And the guidance has got a number of lists of things that those setting the figures need to be thinking about when they actually establish them. And it also gives examples of the approaches that you might want to consider when you're establishing maximum amounts of the damages or incentives. I mean, I can go on, but I'm not sure we have time.
I'll run. And I'll just pick up the last word you used, which is incentives. I really think that it's interesting because when we started this discussion, everybody is looking at, well, and now you're going to bring in damages. And the way that we thought about it is, well, no, the damages and the incentives are the same. So what we want is to bring the positive reinforcement, is to say, well, there's money there to be gained. And so I think if this balanced approach goes into play, it's something that, well, the better contractors, like Andrea was referring earlier, will try to take advantage of this to their own benefit.
I mean, and I think that's incredibly important, because one thing I see as a lawyer, you see clauses like this, and they, as you say, they focus on damages, and they don't do the converse. And I think that's quite a nice testament to FIDIC and their sort of balanced approach that, recognise the importance of incentives, which some of the alternative standard forms that you see adopting this don't do that. So I think it's hats off to FIDIC for putting that in.
Okay, so I shall jump in to answer the last questions until you check what else has to be very quickly answered, because we have a poll also to make before concluding the webinar. So I would answer to Kirill that it is always like appointing a FIDIC engineer, which is a separate consulting company, or using someone from the staff of the employer who is competent competent or appointing just one person. So the same will be, I suppose, with the carbon management, depending on the staff you have, depending on the consultant you are selecting. It may be part of the other services, or you can have a separate entity, or you will have in the future maybe officers which will work for the employer. The main thing is now to the development of this knowledge, of these trainings, and to have trained people like Idris, like Edith, because we need such people within the consulting companies and within the contractors, within the employers as well. So back to you, Hugo, to answer the most important questions.
Well, I have two more here. One that was this: how does FIDIC integrate sustainability performance into its obligations? Well, we focused on trying to manage something within the contract, and this is about carbon emissions. But the tools that were created allow, and the adaptable aspect of the contract tool is the schedule of carbon emissions that will be there. And so the parties may choose to integrate other obligations, to integrate other objectives, to collaborate on, as Jeremy referred earlier. So there are many ways. Further from that, the FIDIC contract suite already included a number of provisions, as in the Red Book and so on, 4.18 and others, which allow the parties through specification already to include a lot. This is just one more aspect to bring this into play.
And now you're answering Sebastian without seeing his question, because this is exactly the question. How what we do is interfacing with existing provisions. You shall find very interesting examples, explanations, and different tools, not only the same course, to use the existing 4.18 and other opportunities.
One aspect, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, there are for sure more questions coming, but I just want to give the floor back to you, Adriana. One aspect that I would leave everyone with, and the challenge that Jesper is already addressing. I remember in one of the first meetings we had 2 years almost, or 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago now. I remember speaking with Edith, and at the time I said, listen, Edith, but even if we need to make this possible to be applied at any step of a project before construction starts. Of course, after that, it becomes harder to introduce obligations that would become a legal nightmare for Jeremy to solve. But up to the tender stage, it's possible. Even if design was not done in a certain way, it's still possible to introduce mechanisms to monitor and to manage things. So the guide cannot be seen as, well, this only works if we start on day zero. No, this can work in many different ways. Pieces of it can be used. And going back to the point that I remember still this edit, I don't know if you do, is saying to you, just imagine that every project using a FIDIC contract was measuring carbon emissions. Even if there are no damages, no incentives, just imagine the knowledge gain if we were measuring everything. And this would transform the industry for sure. And so I'll leave us with that.
Yeah, that's why we need support of the financing institutions to start from somewhere with pilot projects and with these elements which are not so difficult to implement. Now I shall ask FIDIC to start the poll, and at the same time I shall ask Idris to comment until the poll is going on this question by Abdulaziz, which is related to how close are we in 2025 to the net zero. Do you believe we can reach 0.1? So you can find the question in among the last questions in the chat. Idris, if you can comment until the poll is going on. Everyone, please vote. It is very important to see what is your choice. Are you ready to use the carbon management guide and the carbon emission management guidance for FIDIC contracts for the tender documents you are going to prepare in near future? So just select one of these answers. Idris, if you can comment about...
Yes. What is important to recognize is that when the global stocktake of the Paris Agreement was released in 2023 in Dubai, the progress was good, but not strong enough. So currently, the trend is around, I would say, plus 3 degrees, depending on the national contributions, which will be released next in the coming weeks, because the climate COP will happen between the 10th and the 21st of November. Depending on the result of the COP, we'll see if the current trend is likely to be better. I hope so. And having said that, what is important probably to keep in mind is that we may recognize also that now there are 2 references. One reference is for decarbonization, because if we want to avoid big trouble, all actions have to be implemented towards 1.5. Even if now we are not sure that it will be possible, but maybe in the next century it will be possible to reduce the amount of the concentration of GHG in the atmosphere. And at the same time, maybe the civil society should prepare to a risk which is higher than that. And in this regard, it signifies it says that there is a different reference in this case. So, for example, in the specific location of France, the government released in February 2025 a national policy for adaptation, where the reference is plus 4 degrees. So which means in average at a global level it's plus 3, in order to develop consistent policies at local level, where the infrastructure will be able to cope with more adverse effect of climate change. So to summarize, the challenge is here, and it means that we have to support the 1.5, but at the same time maybe to start or to pursue our preparation to a higher rate of temperature in the next decades. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we have seen the poll, which is in line with the question in the chat by Mudassir. Do we have enough trained people? As you can see, there is enthusiasm because 36% of the people want to do this, but 45% I think say first we want to be trained. So FIDIC has this important task to prepare the new trainings. And now I'm giving the floor to the Duna for the concluding remarks. Thank you all for active participation.
Thank you so much, Adriana, and thank you to all the speakers. Again, of course, to the task group for the enormous amount of time given to this work, and to the Contracts Committee. I'm actually very inspired by the result of the poll question, because only 24% is not planning to use the guide yet, which is promising. There is a way to go. There will be a training needed. As mentioned, the implementation of the guide will require collaboration from all stakeholders. So we do make a call for action to everyone in the industry and to everyone attending this webinar to do their best to do something to reduce the carbon on construction projects. And we're here to collaborate and provide more tools. As it has been mentioned and presented during the webinar today, the Carbon Management Guide and Carbon emissions management guidances are for a full life cycle of the project, provide holistic approach and very practical tools that are flexible, that we hope to see implemented in across the countries, and with the contribution of our international experts and with the global coverage that we had from the reviewers and from the contributors, we hope that step by step it will be implemented on from country to country, so that finally we can reach as many countries as we have for FIDIC contracts, which is 170 countries. I'd like to thank you again. Of course, it is not enough to have 1 hour and 30 minutes to fully present everything. So the document will be presented during the International Contract Users Conference in London in December later this year, and that we hope that you will join us for more discussion. Thank you for engaging questions and for all the attendees for joining us today, and we look forward to see you soon, and as I mentioned, hopefully during the International Contract Users Conference in London. Thank you everyone and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.